The November wind was a knife against my skin, sharp, unforgiving, just like the men waiting for me inside Morrison's general store. I pulled my shawl tight and walked up the steps, each boot fall on the old wood a drumbeat announcing my doom. Inside, it smelled like what it was, stale smoke and smug authority. 8 men, the town council, all of them staring at me like I was a problem to be solved. At the head of the table sat Wyatt Carter. His hair was slicked back, shiny as a crow's feather under the lamp. His fancy vest was tight across his belly, a testament to how well a man could eat when he owned the bank, the mill, and half the town's soul. Every man in that room knew I was a widow. Every man knew my ranch was struggling. And every man there was about to use it against me. Wyatt Carter smiled, but it never reached his eyes. It was the kind of smile you see on a wolf right before it bites. "Mrs. Sheridan," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey, "how good of you to join us." I didn't say a word. I just took the last empty chair, a rickety thing that protested under my weight. I knew what was coming. In a town like Redemption Ridge, a woman alone is either a target or a tragedy. I was about to become both. "As I was saying," Wyatt continued, leaning forward like he was sharing a secret instead of passing a sentence, "the matter of the Sheridan property has become a concern." Ice water flooded my veins. "The Sheridan property?" I kept my voice steady, hard as iron. "You mean my home?" Doc Henderson tried to soften the blow. "Now, Mabel, we all understand your attachment, but a woman alone can't manage a cattle operation." "I've been managing just fine for 2 years," I shot back. It was a lie, and we all knew it. The herd was thin, the fences were weak, and the debt was a mountain I couldn't climb. Wyatt's smile widened. "Fine is a generous word, my dear. The ranch is failing, and that, not to mention the impropriety of a young woman living alone with a child, affects us all." Impropriety. There it was, the dirty word they hung on women like me. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Carter?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I could feel the trap closing. Calvin Sawyer, who owned the saloon, cleared his throat. "The council believes the best solution would be for you to remarry." The air went thick. Remarry. They weren't asking. They were telling. They'd been discussing my life, my future, like I was a stray cow to be branded and sold. My hands clenched in my lap. "And if I choose not to?" Wyatt's smile never faltered. "The bank holds your mortgage. We've been patient about the missed payments, but patience has limits." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If you haven't secured a husband by Christmas, we will have no choice but to foreclose." Christmas, 6 weeks away, 6 weeks to find a man, 6 weeks to save my son's home, 6 weeks to sell myself to the highest bidder. Then came the final turn of the screw. "Of course," Wyatt said, his voice dripping with false generosity. "I would be honored to offer myself as a candidate." The room was silent. He'd been circling my ranch for months, a vulture waiting for the kill. Now he was offering to be my savior, but I knew he just wanted my land. He wanted everything Thomas and I had built. I stood up, the chair scraping loud against the floorboards. "I appreciate the council's concern," I said, my voice like chipped ice. "I will give your suggestion the consideration it deserves." I walked to the door, my boot heels clicking like a death march. "Mrs. Sheridan," Wyatt called after me, "Christmas is December 25th. That gives you exactly 6 weeks and 2 days." I stopped, my hand on the cold brass knob. "I'm aware of when Christmas falls, Mr. Carter." "Then you're aware that your time is running out." I pulled the door open, letting the bitter wind rush in. It felt good. It felt like a promise. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they'd broken me. But the men of Redemption Ridge didn't know Mabel Sheridan. They were about to find out what a cornered woman with nothing left to lose could do. The ride home was a blur. The cold air couldn't cool the fire in my chest. My home, my son's future, all of it hanging by a thread, held in Wyatt Carter's fat, greedy hands. As I neared the edge of town, I saw a shape in the moonlight. A man hunched over a pile of scrap wood behind the carpenter's shop. It was Luther Beck. The town called him Simple, a giant of a man with the mind of a child. He did odd jobs, heavy lifting. He lived in a shack and kept to himself. He looked up as I rode past. His eyes weren't dull or vacant. They were gentle, and for a split second, they met mine. He gave a small nod and touched the brim of his worn hat. It was more courtesy than the town council had shown me all evening. I nodded back and rode on, the weight of my impossible choice settling heavier with every step of my horse. I had to find a husband. I had to shop for a man like he was a sack of flour. The idea made my stomach clench. It was a betrayal of Thomas, of everything we'd had. But I had to do it. For my son, Denver. When I crested the last hill, I saw it. The house Thomas built. The barn where we'd weathered storms. My home. In the moonlight, it looked like it could stand forever. But I knew better. Nothing lasts forever. Especially when men with papers and power want what you have. 6 weeks to Christmas. 6 weeks to find a miracle. As I unsaddled my horse, I made a promise to the cold night air. I would not go down without a fight. The next morning, a letter from the bank was waiting for me. Cold, hard proof that the nightmare was real. Marry or lose everything. I was standing at the kitchen window, watching my son Denver chase the chickens, when he suddenly shouted, "Ma, there's a man fixing our fence." My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed my coat and ran outside. Down by the creek, a broad-shouldered man was tamping a new fence post into the ground. He worked with a quiet, practiced skill that was mesmerizing to watch. It was Luther Beck. He looked up as I approached, his face turning a little red. "Morning, Mrs. Sheridan," he mumbled, touching his hat again. "Saw the fence was down. Figured the cattle might get out." The repair was perfect, straight, solid, the wire stretched tight. It was better work than I could have done. Better work than most men in town could have done. "This is very kind of you, Mr. Beck," I said, "but I must pay you for the wire." He shook his head, a big firm shake. "No, ma'am, just being neighborly." Denver, who'd been staring at Luther with wide-eyed curiosity, suddenly piped up. "Are you really simple, like everybody says?" "Denver!" I snapped, mortified. But Luther just smiled, a slow, gentle smile that lit up his face. He looked down at my son. "Simple's not so bad," he said, his voice low and rumbling. "Simple means you see things clear, without all the fancy words getting in the way." The answer stunned me. It was wiser than anything I'd heard from the so-called leaders of our town. Denver wasn't done. "Ma says we might have to leave the ranch," he said, his little voice full of worry. "She says grown-ups have to make hard choices." Luther's gaze shifted to me, and in his eyes I saw something that shook me to my core. It wasn't pity, it was understanding. Deep, powerful understanding. "Sometimes," Luther said, his eyes still on mine, "but sometimes things work out better than you expect." He gathered his tools and walked away, leaving me standing there with my son, a perfectly mended fence, and a head full of questions. Who was Luther Beck? And what did he mean by that? Later that day, I rode into town. I had to face it. I had to see what my options were. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. The general store was buzzing with gossip. Gertie Langston, the town's chief busybody, cornered me by the flour barrels. "Mabel, dear," she cooed, her eyes gleaming, "I heard about the meeting and Wyatt Carter's very generous offer." Word travels fast in a small town, especially bad news. Before I could escape, the door swung open and in walked Calvin Sawyer, the saloon owner, and right behind him was a man I didn't know. He was tall, lean, with the weathered skin of a ranch hand. "Mrs. Sheridan," Calvin boomed. "Perfect timing. Fletcher Kane here has something to ask you." Fletcher Kane twisted the brim of his hat in his hands, his face red. "Ma'am," he stammered, "I heard about your situation. I'm a foreman over at the Double Bar. Saved up a bit. I know cattle. I could make your ranch profitable." It was a business proposal, plain and simple. He wasn't offering his heart. He was offering a partnership. My ranch for his expertise. My freedom for his security. It was practical. It was sensible. And it made me feel completely hollow. "I appreciate your offer, Mr. Kane," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I'll need some time." He nodded. "Of course, ma'am, just..." Don't take too long. A man like Carter, he doesn't like to wait. The way he said it sent a little shiver down my spine. It almost sounded like a warning. I finished my shopping, feeling the eyes of the whole town on me. 2 proposals in one day. I should have been relieved. Instead, I just felt trapped. As I rode home, my mind was a storm. Wyatt Carter, the snake. Fletcher Kane, the stranger. Both of them saw my ranch, my life, as a transaction. When I topped the hill overlooking my home, I saw smoke curling from the chimney. My blood ran cold. Denver was supposed to be at the neighbors. I burst through the door, my heart hammering against my ribs, ready for anything. And I stopped dead. There at my kitchen table sat my son, Denver, a slate in front of him, and sitting next to him, patiently pointing at the numbers, was Luther Beck. A fire was crackling in the hearth. The whole house felt warm, safe. "Ma!" Denver cried, his face beaming. "Luther's helping me with my numbers. He's really good at it." Luther shot to his feet, looking embarrassed. "I hope you don't mind, Mrs. Sheridan. It started snowing, so I brought the boy inside. The fire was almost out." He knew things, not just how to fix a fence or stack wood. He knew mathematics. He knew how to talk to my son, how to make him feel smart and capable. He was patient and kind. He was nothing like the man the town described. "He knows about the stars, Ma," Denver chattered, "and why horses get spooked. He knows everything." As the snow fell outside, turning the world white and quiet, we sat and talked. And I learned that Luther Beck was not a simple man. He was a man who chose to be simple. He had read books I'd never heard of, been to places I'd only dreamed of. When it was time for him to leave, Denver looked heartbroken. "Will you come back?" he asked. Luther looked at me, his eyes asking the same question. My head screamed no. The town was already whispering. Having this man in my home would be a scandal. But my heart saw the way my son looked at him, the way he'd brought warmth and laughter back into our quiet, lonely house. "You're welcome any time, Mr. Beck," I said, and the smile he gave me could have melted the snow on the mountains. That night, as I tucked Denver into bed, he looked at me with serious eyes. "Ma, I think Luther is the smartest man I ever met, smarter than Mr. Carter even." A strange warmth spread through my chest. The world wanted me to choose the rich, powerful banker, the sensible, practical choice. But for the first time, I wondered if the world was wrong. Outside my window, the snow kept falling. It was covering up the old tracks, making everything new. And for a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, my miracle had already arrived. The days that followed fell into a strange, new rhythm. Luther came to the ranch almost every day. He always had a reason: a loose hinge on the barn door, a section of fence that looked weak. But we both knew he was there for more than that. He was there for Denver, and he was there for me. He taught my son how to carve wood, how to read the weather in the clouds. He taught him that learning wasn't a chore, but an adventure. Denver had never been happier. And the evenings. The evenings were something I started to live for. The three of us, sitting around the kitchen table. The quiet comfort of it felt more like family than anything I'd known since Thomas died. But the rest of the world wasn't so quiet. Other suitors came calling. Fletcher Kane came back twice with detailed plans for crop rotation and breeding schedules. Doc Henderson made a polite, if passionless, proposal. Even Calvin Sawyer, the saloon owner, offered to take me on. They were all good men, in their own way, practical men, but their proposals felt like contracts. They were offering to save my ranch. Luther was saving my soul, and he never asked for a thing. Then one afternoon, the serpent returned to my garden. Wyatt Carter rode up on his polished black horse, dismounting like he already owned the place. He sat at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee from my best cup, and got straight to the point. "Christmas is 3 weeks away, Mabel," he said. "It's time we made our arrangement official." "I haven't given you an answer, Mr. Carter," I said, my voice tight. He waved a dismissive hand. "It's the only sensible choice, my dear. We both know that." His eyes scanned my kitchen. "This place needs a man's touch, proper management." He gestured dismissively toward the creek bed. "All this wasted space, could be put to much better use. His gaze drifted to the window. Luther was outside, lifting Denver onto his shoulders to reach a high branch. My son's laughter, pure and joyful, filled the air. Wyatt's face darkened. I see you've been entertaining the village idiot. The casual cruelty of his words sucked the air from the room. Mr. Beck has been very helpful. Helpful? Wyatt scoffed. Mabel, people are talking. A woman in your position can't be seen consorting with a man like that. It's not respectable. You have to consider your son's safety. Men with limited minds, they can't always control their impulses. The suggestion that Luther, gentle, kind Luther, could ever harm my son was so vile it left me speechless. As your future husband, Wyatt continued, his voice taking on a hard, possessive edge, it is my duty to protect you, and I must insist that you end this association immediately. Future husband, insist. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear I'd been living with for weeks burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard rage. You are not my husband, Mr. Carter, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, and you will not insist on anything in my home. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it wide. The cold air felt like a slap. I think this conversation is over. For a second, he looked genuinely shocked that I would dare to defy him. Then his face hardened into a mask of cold fury. You're making a mistake, Mabel, he hissed. Your options are more limited than you realize. I'll be back in a few days when you've had time to come to your senses. He stormed out, leaving a trail of poison in the air. I watched him go, my heart pounding. Through the window, I saw Luther start to gather his tools. He'd seen Wyatt leave. He was preparing to go, to give me space, to not cause more trouble. That's the man he was. Considerate, respectful. Denver ran inside, his cheeks red from the cold. Ma, can Luther come back tomorrow? Please? I looked from my son's hopeful face to the man walking away in the snow. The man who showed me more kindness in a few weeks than the rest of the town had in 2 years. And I made a choice. I stepped out onto the porch. Mr. Beck, I called out. He stopped and turned, his expression cautious. Denver would be very disappointed if you didn't come back tomorrow, I said, my voice clear and strong. A slow smile spread across Luther's face, bright enough to light up the gray afternoon. I'd be honored, Mrs. Sheridan. And Luther, I added, stepping closer, my voice dropping so only he could hear. I've been wrong to let them rule my life. If I deserve punishment for that, then let it be this. The only punishment I deserve is to be choked to pleasure. His eyes widened, and in their gentle depths, I saw a fire I had never noticed before. As he walked away, I stood on that porch, the cold wind whipping around me, and I didn't feel cold at all. I felt alive. I felt free. Wyatt Carter had tried to put me in a cage, but he'd only succeeded in showing me the key. The town did not approve. My defiance of Wyatt Carter, followed by my open invitation to Luther Beck, was the scandal of the season. Whispers followed me down the street. Women who used to be my friends now crossed to the other side to avoid me. Gertie Langston made loud, pointed comments in the general store about widows who had no shame. Even Calvin Sawyer, who I thought had a good heart, pulled me aside after church one Sunday. Mabel, people are talking, he warned, his face grim. They're saying you're taking advantage of Luther, using him for free labor while you wait for a better offer. The accusation stung. Worse, he continued, lowering his voice, Carter is spreading it around that a woman who'd associate with a man like Luther might not be a suitable mother. He's hinting that your judgment is flawed. The threat was clear. Wyatt wasn't just trying to take my ranch anymore. He was trying to take my son. That night, the weight of it all felt crushing. As Luther helped Denver with his arithmetic, I watched him. The patience he showed, the quiet intelligence in his eyes. There was a strength in him that had nothing to do with the size of his hands. Luther, I said suddenly, what do you want? From life? He looked up, surprised. He thought for a long moment, the way he always did before he spoke. I want to be useful, he said softly, to have friends who don't think less of me because I'm different. His eyes met mine across the table, and my heart ached. I want to belong somewhere. He wanted what we all want, a place to call home. The next morning, I had an unexpected visitor. Elsie Madden, the blacksmith's wife, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp eye. Mabel, she said, getting right to the point, I've known Luther Beck since he came to this town, and I don't think he's simple at all. My breath caught. I've seen him read, she said. Not the paper, big, thick books, philosophy, mathematics. And last month, I was in Kansas City. I saw a man coming out of the territorial courthouse, dressed in a fine suit, carrying himself like a senator. And Mabel. It was Luther's exact double. A chill ran down my spine. My sister, she lives there, Elsie went on, her eyes wide. She said that man is a famous legal expert, a brilliant mind they consult on the most complicated property disputes. They say he comes from a very wealthy, very powerful family back east. The pieces started clicking into place. His intelligence, his careful way with words, his mysterious past. Luther Beck was hiding, but why? Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Because Christmas is 5 days away, Elsie said, her gaze firm, and you're about to make a choice that will define the rest of your life. I think you deserve to know who you're choosing between. When Luther arrived that afternoon, I couldn't look at him the same way. I saw the intelligence he tried so hard to hide. I saw the power he kept coiled inside him. While Denver was napping, I walked out to the barn where Luther was mending a harness. Luther, I said, my voice shaking slightly, I need to ask you something. Are you really as simple as everyone believes? He stopped working. For a long time, he just stared out at the snow-covered fields. Simple is easier, he finally said, his voice heavy. People don't expect much from simple. They don't ask complicated questions. He turned to face me, and the sadness in his eyes was a physical blow. And they don't hurt what they don't fear. Simple is safe. He was a brilliant man, hiding in plain sight, pretending to be less than he was, just to be left alone, just to be accepted. The injustice of it was overwhelming. You matter to me, I said, my voice thick with emotion, and you matter to Denver. His eyes searched mine, full of a desperate hope. Even if I'm not who they think I am? Especially then, I whispered. Before he could answer, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the quiet afternoon. 3 riders, the sheriff, Wyatt Carter, and Fletcher Kane. They rode up with the grim purpose of an execution squad. Luther instantly changed. The thoughtful, open man I was just speaking to vanished. In his place was the slow, simple handyman the town knew, a mask he wore for protection. Mrs. Sheridan, the sheriff said, not bothering to dismount, we've had some concerns raised about Mr. Beck's presence here. Wyatt Carter smirked from his saddle. It's not proper, Mabel. A woman alone can't be trusted to judge a man's character, especially an unusual individual like this one. Every word was an insult, meant to demean Luther, to paint him as a threat and me as a fool. I stepped forward, planting myself between them and Luther, a silent declaration. He is with me. Mr. Beck's mind works just fine, I said, my voice ringing with a certainty I didn't know I possessed. Better than some I could mention. Wyatt's face tightened. This is foolish sentiment, Mabel. It's time to end this charade. You will marry me on Christmas Eve, and Mr. Beck here will be on his way. He said it like it was already done, like my will, my choice, meant nothing. I have not agreed to marry you, Mr. Carter, I said, my voice loud and clear for all of them to hear. You have no choice, he snarled, his mask of civility finally slipping. The bank will foreclose. I am your only option. And then a low voice rumbled from behind me. Perhaps Mrs. Sheridan has other options to consider. It was Luther. He stepped out from the barn and he was transformed. He stood tall, his shoulders back. The careful humility was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. He was no longer hiding. Wyatt laughed, a nasty, brutish sound. You? What could a simpleton like you possibly offer a respectable woman? Luther took a step forward, and for the first time I saw the true power he held in his frame. It wasn't just physical strength. It was something more. Perhaps you'd be surprised by what I can offer. The air crackled with tension. The sheriff's hand drifted towards his gun. Mrs. Sheridan has the right to choose her own husband, Luther said, his voice calm but hard as granite. And I have the right to court her? The word hung in the air. A challenge. The town simpleton was publicly challenging the most powerful man in the county. Wyatt was sputtering, his face purple with rage. This is absurd. She would never choose you. Luther's eyes found mine, and he gave me a small, determined smile. I believe Mrs. Sheridan is capable of making her own decisions. The sheriff cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Ma'am, you understand the legal reality. After Christmas, the foreclosure will proceed. I understand perfectly, I said. Then I turned my back on all of them and looked at the man who was risking everything to stand by my side. The man who saw me, not my ranch. Mr. Beck, I said, my voice formal but my heart soaring, would you do me the honor of staying for supper? I believe we have some things to discuss. The look on Wyatt Carter's face was a masterpiece of pure fury, but the smile that lit up Luther's face, that was worth all the trouble in the world. As the three riders galloped away in a cloud of angry dust, I knew one thing for sure. The fight for my home, for my future, had just begun. And for the first time, I wasn't fighting it alone. That supper was the quietest, most intense meal of my life. Denver, sensing the gravity in the air, ate his stew without a single complaint. Luther and I, we just looked at each other. There were 1,000 questions hanging between us, but for now it was enough to just be in the same room, on the same side. After Denver was asleep, we sat at the kitchen table, the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Kansas City, I said softly. Elsie Madden saw you. He didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly. My name isn't really Beck, he said, his voice low. It's Luther Beaumont. My family is influential back east. They had my life planned out for me. A law practice, a suitable wife, a seat in the legislature. It was a gilded cage, Mabel. I couldn't breathe. So he ran. He gave up a life of wealth and power to be a simple handyman in a town that mocked him, just to be free. Why here? I asked. I was just passing through, he said, a sad smile touching his lips. But then I saw you at your husband's funeral. You stood so strong, so full of grace in your grief. I saw the way you looked at your son, and he trailed off, looking down at his large calloused hands. I decided to stay a while. He had been watching over us, from a distance, for 2 years, a silent guardian I never knew I had. Wyatt Carter doesn't just want your ranch, Mabel, he said, his expression turning serious. He wants what's under it. He explained what he'd suspected, what his legal mind had been piecing together, the way Wyatt had bought up the surrounding, seemingly worthless properties, the way he'd steered the conversation at my meeting to the ranch's failings, never its assets. The strange comment about the wasted space by the creek. There's something on your land, Luther said, something valuable. And he's using the mortgage, this marriage deadline, to steal it from you legally. The next day, we walked the property line. It was Luther who found them, hidden under years of brush and dirt near the creek. Old, forgotten survey markers. He pulled out a worn, leather-bound book from his satchel, a copy of the original territorial land grants. He ran his finger along the faded ink. Just as I thought. The official map at the town office is wrong. It's been altered. Your property, the original Sheridan grant, extends another 200 yards south. He led me to a rocky outcrop on the land that was, by rights, mine. He knelt down and scraped away some of the loose rock. Underneath, a thick, dark vein snaked through the stone. It gleamed in the winter sun with a dull, heavy luster. Silver, a rich deposit. Wyatt Carter knew it was here. He had falsified the town map, created a fraudulent debt, and engineered a social crisis, all to steal a fortune that was rightfully mine. He wasn't a banker. He was a thief on a colossal scale. We stood there, the cold wind whipping around us, the truth laid bare. We had proof. But what could we do? Christmas was 2 days away. Wyatt controlled the sheriff, the council, the law in this town. We were trapped. He's going to win, I whispered, the hope draining out of me. Luther took my hand. His was warm and strong. No, he's not. He looked at me, and the gentle handyman was gone. In his place was Luther Beaumont, the brilliant legal mind, the man who knew how to fight the powerful because he was one of them. He thinks he's cornered a simple widow, but he's about to find out he's picked a fight with the wrong people. He told me his plan. It was audacious. It was dangerous. It relied on a single telegram and a whole lot of nerve. He would have to reveal who he was. He would have to reach out to the world he had run away from, the gilded cage he'd escaped. He was willing to do it. For me, for Denver. They'll find me, he said quietly. My family. They'll try to drag me back. We'll face them together, I said, and I had never been more certain of anything in my life. Christmas Eve arrived with a heavy gray sky that promised more snow. The whole town was buzzing. Wyatt Carter had made it known that he would be calling on the widow Sheridan at noon to receive her final answer. He wanted a public spectacle. He wanted to humiliate me before he devoured me. At precisely noon, he rode up, not alone. The entire town council was with him, a grim jury ready to witness my surrender. The sheriff was there, his hand resting on his gun, a clear message. They dismounted and walked to my porch, their faces a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction. Wyatt Carter stood in the center, holding the foreclosure documents in his hand like a trophy. Well, Mabel, he said, his voice booming for all to hear, the time has come. Have you made the sensible choice? He expected to see me broken, beaten, begging. He was not prepared for what he saw. The front door opened. I stepped out, and beside me, holding my hand, stood Luther. He was not wearing his worn work clothes. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that must have been hidden away in his shack. His hair was combed. He stood tall and straight, radiating an aura of power and intelligence that stunned the crowd into silence. He was no longer Luther Beck, the village idiot. He was Luther Beaumont, and he was magnificent. Wyatt Carter's jaw dropped. He stared, speechless. Mr. Carter, Luther said, his voice calm and clear, ringing across the yard. I believe you have committed several felonies, including conspiracy, fraud, and attempted theft of mineral rights belonging to Mrs. Sheridan. He held up the copy of the original land grant. The Sheridan Ranch, as you well know, includes the silver vein at Miller's Creek, a fact you sought to conceal by falsifying the official county map. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The council members started looking at each other nervously. Wyatt laughed, but it was a brittle, desperate sound. This is absurd. You have no proof. Who are you to make such accusations? I am Luther Beaumont, he said simply, as if announcing the weather, and my proof is on its way. As if on cue, a lone rider appeared at the end of the lane, galloping hard. It was the telegraph boy. He slid off his horse, ran up to the porch, and handed a telegram not to the sheriff, but directly to Luther. Luther opened it and read it aloud. To Luther Beaumont, per your request, have reviewed original territorial surveys. Sheridan Grant is confirmed. Have dispatched federal marshals to Redemption Ridge to investigate banking and land fraud allegations against Wyatt Carter. They will arrive tomorrow. Signed, Governor Thompson. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a snowflake land. Wyatt Carter's face had gone the color of ash. The foreclosure papers slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the ground. He was ruined, and he knew it. The sheriff, realizing he had backed the wrong man, took a step away from Carter. The council members began shouting, claiming they'd been misled, that they never trusted Carter, that they were shocked by his deception. Fletcher Kane pushed his way through the crowd, yelling that Carter had paid him to make a false proposal to pressure me. The pack of wolves had turned on its leader. Wyatt just stood there, his empire crumbling around him, staring at the man he had called an idiot. Luther ignored the chaos. He turned to me, his eyes full of a question he was afraid to ask. He had saved me. He had used the power and the name he had run from to give me back my life. But he was worried that I would now only see the powerful lawyer, the wealthy Beaumont heir. I looked at him, the brilliant man in the fine suit, and I saw past it all. I saw the kind, gentle soul who had fixed my fence, the patient teacher who had helped my son with his numbers, The quiet guardian who had watched over us. The man who wanted more than anything, a place to belong. I reached up and touched his face. "Welcome home, Luther," I whispered. It was the best Christmas we ever had. The ranch was safe. The town was finally free of Wyatt Carter's grip. The federal marshals arrived on Christmas Day and took him away in irons. And I had found my miracle. He wasn't the man the world told me to choose. He was the man my heart had chosen all along. We had a long fight ahead of us with his family, I was sure. But looking at him across the dinner table, watching him laugh with my son, I knew we could face anything together. If this story reminded you that a person's true worth can't be measured by money or status, and that the greatest strength often lies in the kindest hearts, do me a favor. Hit that like and subscribe button for more stories that prove that love and courage can overcome even the greatest odds.